I have no fond memories of Kirby. I didn't grow up with any of the games, and the only time I interacted with the little pink dude was in Smash 64. This is important to know before I say my next spicy statement. I think Kirby is a flawless video game series because it is the strongest video game archetype. Now, you can definitely point out a few technical issues with the series. It's too easy, some games have silly gimmicks, Kirby is pink, I get that. The reason I find it flawless is in its relationship to video games as a whole. But to define that, we also need to explore the idea of an archetypical video game. What do we consider to solely be a video game element? Something that cannot be recreated in a movie or a book. Something that can only be understood and enjoyed in this interactive media. And that's my excuse. It's been a stressful year, so I'm gonna play a bunch of Kirby games, in order, until I cannot continue. Let's begin! Legend goes that Masahiro Sakurai fell asleep in the woods and dreamed about the moon. When he woke up, he began screaming and didn't stop until Kirby was finished. That's true. I read it. The series got its start on the Game Boy with its first title, Kirby's Dreamland. It's about a half hour long, which is how it went back in the day. It's honestly a miracle how much actually happens in those 30 minutes. You can see the careful attention put into the gameplay to make it an experience you wouldn't mind having a dozen times over. Each level opens with a cutscene that goes a long way to establish the tone of this game, something truly unheard of for the Game Boy and perfectly pantomimes the upbeat mood of Dreamland. Kirby can fly indefinitely, which always brings up the idea of why we would ever subject ourselves to doing anything other than fly over every obstacle. The game counteracts this issue by having the tightly zoomed in camera and verticality to balance this superpower. This is the first time we see the main gameplay loop of sucking up enemies and items and using them as range attacks. Nowadays this seems like a given, but this was totally new at the time. When you're holding something in your mouth, you cannot fly, so you have to be careful in the platforming areas. A lot of this game marks the budding ideas that will become mainstays. You got your wispy woods, the microphone screen clear, and the final battle against King Dedede. I love seeing the curry power up here. I always thought that this was originally from Smash, but what is Smash Brothers if not a collection of every video game known to man? I'm also surprised to see this on-rail shooting section show up in the very first title. It seems to be a running tradition to have just a kiss of a different gameplay style for each game, usually just before you hit the very end as the ramp to the climax. When you get to the final battle against the big bad Dedede, you learn the handful of moves. This may not seem like much, but if my foreshadowing wasn't blatant enough, you'll see these same maneuvers again very soon, actually giving you a hand in future final fights, friendo. Though there is no enemy suck for godly powers, this is a genuine Kirby experience, albeit a little bare bone. Keep in mind what you see here, as most of the next games will be the same concept, but pushed towards their realization. If you're looking for flesh, we need to move to the NES for Kirby's Adventure. This is what I consider to be the first substantial Kirby game. Everything that was on the Game Boy is new and improved, and boy, we are pink! I love the intro to this game. It's literally a tutorial on how to draw Kirby that immediately shows massive charm, still wrapped in that simple emotive comic style we saw previously. The cutscenes before each world return, and the very first thing they show you is how sucking up enemies now rewards you with a new power. When you add in the mini-games like the toy crane and the quick draw, it is really hard to believe that this is an NES game. And on that note, it does suffer from its ambition because, buddy, this game will chug. Which doesn't surprise me seeing all these moving parts. Look at this airship level and think about how Mario went about presenting a similar concept, and Kirby comes across at a whole other level. As cool and critical as the power-ups are, it does throw the difficulty of the game out of whack. Just look at the original fight against Wispy Woods on Game Boy compared to now. Granted, this is the first boss of the game, and surprisingly, this game does have quite a few difficult sections, though that mostly comes down to not having any ability during a fight, and having to win the good old-fashioned way. Every world has its own theme that's present in both the levels and in the overworld, even sporting a transition using the Warp Star, giving way more believability than any NES game really deserves to have. This whole game is just the first step of expanding the experience that Dreamland was trying to offer, and finally having just enough room to stretch its legs out and tell a full story. There are all these little tricks that make this game feel so much more complex than it actually is. The ball power-up has this strange physics effects, and circling around these towers gives off a strong 3D feel. The sense of progression goes a long way to making each level feel like a real place, rather than some programmed stage. Getting closer to the end of the game, you'll ascend this twilight world and take on a handful of challenge rooms, but once you get to the 6th stage, something magical happens. It's a little weird to feel nostalgic about a game that was literally the only other game you've released so far, but I cannot think of another level from an NES game that not only caught me this off guard, but made me smile with its callback. It was at this exact moment that I was sold on the series, and for the silliest reasons, I feel like I've finally understood how well crafted these games truly are. We match with D once again for an exact copy of the original fight, but the victory here isn't the end. In a strange twist, you see the king grab your feet and give you this genuine warning to stop your quest. We naturally ignore this and land smack dab in the middle of the actual boss fight. This is the first time that Kirby does its weird calling card of having a seemingly cute and relaxed game all the way up until the final boss, which it always is some disturbingly out of place monster. Not that this is a bad thing. I'm glad it's not just another showdown with the big penguin boy, but it's all tied to this weird background lore of the games. Originally, I was just gonna stick to the mainline games in the series, but when I think about it, like I really think about it, we gotta talk about Dream Course. And that's for a couple of reasons. This was the next game in the timeline and the first on the Super Nintendo, which is weird because by the time Adventure came out, the SNES was 3 years deep, but hey, I'm just some dork on the internet. This was also the first time we see a co-op title, which is absolutely perfect. This may seem like a weird golf game, but you would be mistaken. This is so much more infuriating than golf, and I absolutely love it. You grab one of your buddies, don't explain any of the controls, and enjoy straining a friendship as hard as you can through 8 holes. Unfortunately for me, my buddy already knows how this goes and just wipes the floor with me. If you know, you know. It's gonna take both hands to get this one done. By itself, it's quaint, but when you can bounce off another person, there's just enough engagement in these short bursts of gameplays to have a lot of fun. Also, it's on the Switch VC, so just try it. It's gnar, dude. Okay, getting back to the main entries, we hit up another dream. We kick it back to the Game Boy and miraculously it's in color now. Thank you, emulation. Surprisingly, this game is loaded with content, including the power-ups and hub worlds from before. You also get these animal friends to help you on your quest. I ran into this hamster, and I don't know much, but I definitely know I want him to be my friend. I looked it up and his name is Rick. Rick! Absolutely wonderful. There's also a fish and a bird, but come on, Rick is in the house. No, you can't hang out here. There are about a half dozen abilities in this game, and each one has an alternative mode where you're with an animal buddy. Sometimes this can be extremely effective, like the cutter paired with Koo, or adorable, like the freeze with Rick. It took a second for it to click in my mind that you're actually a snowman, and then I was stoked. There's so much going on in this game. This is the first time we collect stars for a 1-up. I know, groundbreaking. But there's a ton of bosses and a few of them put up a solid challenge. You can stand to have a couple more tries. We still have that issue where if you have a power-up in a boss encounter, you have a crazy advantage, but they attempt to counter this by rewarding more damage when fighting the boss with the intended suck and blow method. There are a few drawbacks, mainly just in the design. Here we have a friend that's guarded by these ineffectual sensories, and there's no way to save them. In fact, touching the bag hurts you. I'm pretty sure you could break those black box using the electric power-up, but heyo, I don't have one. Goodbye, mystery animal. You will be missed. And don't even get me started with this part. Being united with my boy and then just barely not being able to leave this incredibly open platform. Not only do I not get to chill with Rick, but they make me destroy him myself like this is Metal Gear Solid 3. You also have this section here where you have to choose between 3 different routes and 2 of them just outright kill you. You also have to do this 4 times in a row, so you're just about guaranteed to eat it at least once. Shh, don't look. Good night, sweet prince. At the end, we face off against old boy Dedede, and this time he's got this angry narcoleptic vibe. Genuinely got bodied a few times here to the point where finally winning felt ridiculously good. And that's it. That's the true ending. Totally accomplished. Pay 0 attention to this part right here. Don't even look at it. Alright, it's time to stop sandbagging this video, because now we are on to what I consider to be the peak of Kirby games. It's Superstar, baby! While I was genuinely surprised by how much I liked the original trilogy of games, there was always a sense that the hardware was holding them back. Whether it was the lag or ideas that didn't have enough room to grow, these games are just before their time when it came to its hardware. But on the Super Nintendo? Listen, these first few games were all about figuring out how to crawl, but now that we have all this extra power, we skip over walking and we are soaring. Also note that this game came out 1 year after Dreamland 2. Either they were working on the split from the Game Boy, or they just had so much they wanted to do after finishing Dream Course that it all spilled out into this magnum opus. Either way, it's impressive. The presentation is all new. You have a corkboard of adventures to choose from. Spring Breeze is spiritually the best starting point and even comes with a tutorial if you feel so inclined. I love the way that it refers to the SNES controller as that gray thing with the purple buttons, and it even hits us with a solid GLHF. Some of you keen viewers might remember these levels. It's a remake of Dreamland with all new bells and whistles. It even has the little stage introductions. This is just a taste of the new content. All the bosses have been trivialized by the power-ups and buddy system. Even Mario can't believe it. Hey, Mario! You get to the end in about 10 minutes, where the credits roll, but wicked fast this time. As we reach the final screen, Kirby holds up the sign one more time, but instead of saying bye-bye, it now pushes us to discover the actual game. Now that we have a grasp on the new controls and features, we are officially in there like swimwear. Dynablade is your first real taste of this updated rigmarole. The only bit of story you get is that Dynablade is destroying all the crops and we have to stomp her into the ground. Nothing new for this strange wad of gum. We get another set of tutorials, this time focused on the copy ability and how to get the most out of it. Once you actually drop into the first level, you can see how the new design is implemented. The landscape is longer with more space to compensate for your increased speed, while still keeping the verticality from the Game Boy games. This is the first time the camera feels like it's the appropriate distance from your character that frees up your movement. The portable games were super cramped around Kirby, and the NES game was like playing through a window. This is also the first time we get to use the copy abilities where the game compensates for it, and it is absolutely sublime. Every power-up is beautifully animated with its own style and approach. No matter what you end up using, you always have a way to succeed just by the insane power these abilities give you. It really feels like this is what the gameplay was always shooting for, and it's finally realized on this console. And you might as well double that feeling now because this is a true-to-form 2-player game. When you play solo, you can take your sweet moves and conjure a buddy to serve you until death, just like real friends. Even though this is a brand new mechanic, it fits so naturally in the gameplay that it feels like it's always been a part of the series. Your CPU buddy rarely gets in your way and can pull off some really gnarly damage. Not to mention that you have items like the wheel where you can team up for more awesome combinations. Of course, you can also get a real-life buddy to come over and play some Kirby with you, and it's just a simple drop-in and drop-out system. You will make out with your friend a handful of times, so make sure you're ready to have that conversation. Sadly, they do look really awkward when you decide to triplify yourself for the choreographed dance session, but that's just how it goes in the Dreamland, you know? I love how the backgrounds have that Donkey Kong style 3D objects pressed into pixels. I know that's a spicy topic for you aesthetic people, but I still think it's charming, really putting that silicone graphics station to use. After your extremely short journey, you finally face off against the robot bird herself. Luckily, she didn't have the foresight to bring a friend with her, so we enjoy a cozy, unfair advantage. It wasn't even close. But shortly after victory, you realize that this bird you just crunched was actually a mother. Logically, Kirby just decides to raise them instead. That's a pretty bold power move. Makes me think Kirby's a part of some Greek legend. Before we jump into the mighty Meta Knight fighty fight, I think we should talk about the mini games included with this game. The quick draw game from Adventure makes a spiritual return with Samurai Kirby. It's basically the same game. Wait for the mark, press the button as fast as you can. I still cannot beat this penguin dude, and honestly, I get so anxious waiting for the mark I mostly just botch the jump. Okay. Whew. Okay. There's also Megaton Punch, which is my jam. Granted, it's just 3 quick time events in a row, but there's something so magical to nailing all the prompts and splitting your planet in half. Then there's also Gourmet Race. I'll be honest, outside of the absolute banger of a song made for the game, there really isn't much to say about it. Maybe my movement isn't up to snuff to really get that race mode, but there just isn't much here for me. Gloves off, it's time to really get into this game. Revenge of Meta Knight is the only game with a constant timer that really bumps the internal tempo. Although this is a bit cheesed with the timer going off at different speeds depending on what section you're in. I remember watching Game Grumps play this way back in the day and thinking it was so insane that they ended their game on the literal last second of the timer, but if I had paid attention, I would have seen that it's programmed to come down to the wire every time. Instead of an overworld, you see a progression of how you're wrecking the halberd with all these little interjections from Meta Knight and his crew. You're just blindly slapping an enormous spacecraft out of the sky with a buddy, and these underlings are losing their minds. This campaign has mad character. And I love the color palette as well. Everything taking place at sunset with heavy shades of orange bouncing between the forest and the metallic hull of the ship. It all feels like the final chapter of Kirby's story. It's not. Somehow, I stumbled onto this little secret area, and there's even a little taste of secret dialogue. I know this is probably just an Easter egg, but it definitely made me think back to all the potential secret doors I've missed. The distance between this game and the previous iterations' content is ridiculous. Finally, we face off with the man himself, the big dog of the sky, the bane of Brawl, Meta Knight. And this guy absolutely kicks my ass. The damage he can dish out with that sword is ridiculous. But through perseverance, we finally win the battle, revealing that Meta Knight is actually also a Kirby thing. This revelation would have meant a lot more if they didn't already do this on the NES, but don't worry, they will continue to reveal this for every single Kirby game for the rest of time. We begin a harrowing race to escape the base, riding on our friend to victory. Why did we do all this again? Don't think about that. We have treasure to plunder. If you haven't noticed, for the most part every Kirby campaign is based around going from point A to point B with a handful of extra sections to reward a 1-up or a tomato. This is not the case with our final 2 offerings. With the Great Cave Offensive, the main goal is to collect as many treasures as you can. There are 60 in total, all hidden in this labyrinthian cave. Most of these are naturally found through exploration, but quite a few of them will take a puzzle and really keen eyes to be able to get them. Off the bat, the music of this stage immediately reminds me of this. Oh man. It really does set the tone for this stage, actually. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's definitely the weakest experience on offer. Kirby always feels best when you're on the move, pushing forward to constantly see new things and experience new challenges. It doesn't sit well when you're trying to precisely platform switch doors and looking for the way forward. This is a minor complaint though. There's a lot of variety all connected between these kart rides, plenty of boss fights to stumble on. A lot of the difficult treasures to find are also references to other Nintendo games. Oh, Mr. Saturn. I'll be talking about you soon. I love the RPG boss. When Kirby is at its best, it flows with this steeze that reflects in its design and visuals like swimming through us in a cosmic backstroke. They know how good their gameplay loop is, and at this point they're just dabbing on you with a cornucopia of features. And that's about it for the Big Dig Cave Wave. This is the only story that doesn't end on a climax. You kinda just get up to the entrance and leave. Yeah, I get I only found 1/4 of the treasures, but what are you gonna do? I'm trying to get to the big sun and moon conflict. And I don't mean the Pokemons! This is it. The big moment. The sun and the moon are fighting, and we have to kill God. Concentrate, and do your best. I love that this overworld is free roam. Granted, you can't go anywhere outside of the normal progression, but it's just a nice touch to get to fly to each planet. They all point towards each other once finished to guide your star as well to demonstrate the unearthly powers you're conjuring. Big news, buddy boy. There is no more murder for power. You can't gain anything from destroying your enemies other than 6 satisfaction. The trade-off is, once you do find a power-up, you have it forever. You can switch whenever you feel like it, which also means you get infinite friends. This whole saga is a culmination of everything you've done so far. The bosses, the zones, the enemies, the music, everything raised to its crescendo, literally fighting through the stars in the sky until you finally find the biggest boy. He grants us one wish, and we are struck down by this purple jester, stealing our wish to gain control over the galaxy. Surprise! We have an on-rail shooters to go find Marks and mush him into the dirt. I really love this generator part inside of Nova. The 3-dimensional work is genuinely impressive for the time, and only sort of makes me want to pull my hair out. We give the giant clock an aneurysm and prepare to face off against the communist jester. Look at this. It's a beautiful callback to adventure, and the idea is finally realized. Everything finally feels realized. We win, the giant idiot splits into a million pieces, the sun and moon go back to their jobs, and Kirby finally goes back to sleep. Oh yeah! And there you have it. You do get a boss rush mode, the prototype for the Smash All-Stars section, with the in-between stage holding limited healing and power-ups, but this is the end of the line, at least for now. Taking everything that we've seen here at just the beginning of the Kirby series, I can't help but think that this is such a perfect representation of what a video game is. Sure, they are on the easy side, shorter than most games when considering their original price. Most of the time you'll have repackaged versions of these original stories, but that's not what makes this such a great archetype. This experience can only exist in the world of games. The premise is so far removed from fictional realism, the motivation is non-existent, the function of powering up through suck and flying from planet to planet, eating sweets and curry along the way. Every single aspect is totally fleshed out and given to the player in a way that is solely unique and remarkable. All this feeling, the feedback, what you take away from this game is something you cannot find anywhere else. If you ask me, I'd say that's what a game should be, and in that way, Kirby is flawless.